Welcome everyone to today's webinar for Section 16 filers. My name is Daniel Chang, and I'm a Senior Special Counsel in the EDGAR Business Office. If you participated in our previous webinars, some of the content being presented today may be familiar to you, but we've attempted to collate the most relevant information for this topic and also add new information considerations relevant for Section 16 filers. To maximize our time to get together today without interruption, the chat function will be turned off for the Q&A. Will be turned off and will be turned on again for the Q&A at the end of the webinar only. We expect many of your questions will be answered during the presentation. Please note that today's webinar will be recorded. We'll be posting that recording together with the slide deck to the EDGAR Next page on sc.gov. Okay, so here's a disclaimer. This presentation represents the views of the staff of the EDGAR Business Office. It is not a rule, regulation, or statement of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The Commission has neither approved nor disapproved its content. As with all staff statements, this information has no legal force or effect. It does not alter or amend the applicable law, and it creates no new or additional obligations on any person. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here's the agenda. So today we'll be providing a brief overview of EDGAR Next, going through some of the things to consider when preparing for enrollment, talk about how to obtain individual account credentials, discuss enrollment in EDGAR Next, and then end with Q&A. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the first section, overview of EDGAR Next. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So what is EDGAR Next? EDGAR Next is designed to improve EDGAR security, filer access, and account management processes. The EDGAR Next adopting release contains more detailed information, but we will be doing our best to provide a brief summary here. Although EDGAR Next encompasses a variety of changes, there are three in particular we'd like to focus on for today's discussion. First, current EDGAR uses entity-level access codes with no individual-level authorization or multi-factor authentication. EDGAR Next addresses this issue by introducing individual account credentials with multi-factor authentication from login.gov, which allows for identification and tracking of individuals logging into EDGAR. Second, filers currently share access code potentially via various unsecured methods, such as by email, post-it notes, or over the telephone. EDGAR Next addresses this issue by providing a new filer management dashboard to manage filers' accounts and filing permissions in a standardized, transparent manner. The dashboard will include the names of all individuals and delegate entities who are able to act on the filer's behalf in EDGAR, and those individuals will be able to see the filer's information in the dashboard, including access codes such as CCC as appropriate. Third and finally, filing agents currently engage in web scraping to create custom filing applications that are not formally supported by the SEC. EDGAR Next addresses this issue by providing application programming interfaces, or APIs, to allow filing agents and filers to directly connect to EDGAR via machine-to-machine connections to provide improved stability and performance for custom filing applications. Next slide, please. Scope of EDGAR Next. So all EDGAR filers must comply with EDGAR Next. This includes all entities such as registrants and filing agents, as well as individuals such as 16 filers that file on EDGAR. Note that in lieu of the term filer, we may also use the terms EDGAR account or CIK. Next slide, please. Okay, transition to EDGAR Next. On March 24th, 2025, the EDGAR Filer Management website will be updated. Among other changes, the new dashboard will become available to allow filers to more easily manage their accounts. As part of this process, legacy filer management functions will be removed. This means that filers who need to update their access codes or take similar action should ideally do so before March 24th, 2025. The dashboard will be accessed by providing login.gov individual account credentials and completing multi-factor authentication. This provides security for account management purposes. The dashboard will allow filers to enroll in EDGAR Next and submit Form ID to apply for EDGAR access. All existing EDGAR filers will be required to take action to enroll in EDGAR Next, whether those CIKs are associated with registrants, filing agents, or individuals making beneficial ownership filings. If an existing CIK is unable to enroll, then the CIK must reapply for EDGAR access by submitting Form ID. All new CIKs created after the initial compliance date of March 24th, 2025 will be automatically subject to EDGAR Next and will not need to subsequently enroll. This is because Form ID submitted through the dashboard will require the filer to specify the identities of the prospective accounting administrators who will be managing the filer's account. Enrolled filers can use optional APIs to make submissions, retrieve information, and manage their EDGAR accounts. Next slide, please. Starting September 15, 2025, all 3 EDGAR websites will require individual account credentials and multi-factor authentication for access purposes. In addition, filers that have not yet enrolled in EDGAR will no longer be able to file until they enroll. Once again, the caveat is that filers who have submitted Form ID through the dashboard and have had those applications granted by SEC staff will not need to enroll because those filers will already have specified their account administrators on Form ID. On December 19, 2025, enrollment ends. Filers that have not yet enrolled will lose EDGAR access until they submit a Form ID application that is granted by SEC staff. Next slide, please. Okay, individual roles in EDGAR Next. Diagram 1 relates to authorization of individual roles and is taken directly from the EDGAR Next adopting release. It shows the relationship between the different roles and how those roles can be added. Let's go through each of these roles in more detail. Account administrators will manage the filer's account on the dashboard, including adding and removing individuals, performing annual confirmation of dashboard information, delegating authority to file to other CIKs, and generating or creating custom CCCs. A filer can have a maximum of 20 account administrators. Users will make submissions on behalf of the filer and can view the CCC. A filer can have a maximum of 500 users. Technical administrators will generate filer API tokens and manage the filer's connection to APIs. A filer can have a maximum of 20 account administrators. This matches the limit for account administrators, which is intentional, so the filer who wishes their technical administrator to also be an account administrator can do so. There will be roles for each person authorized to act in EDGAR on behalf of a filer. Each of these persons will be required to obtain individual account credentials from login.gov, which will be used to identify them. For that reason, these credentials cannot be shared with others. These credentials, together with multi-factor authentication, will be used to verify their identity each time they log into EDGAR to take actions on behalf of filers. This will provide traceability and accountability for filings and other actions taken in EDGAR. In contrast, going to sec.gov to view filings in EDGAR will not require individual account credentials. Next slide, please. Diagram 2 shows the key functions for each role and is also taken from the adopting release. An individual may have multiple roles at the same filer. An account administrator can perform all the functions of a user, plus also manage the filer's account. So it would be meaningless for an account administrator to also be a user of the filer. Thus, for a given filer, an account administrator cannot also be a user, but the account administrator can be a technical administrator. In contrast, for a given filer, a technical administrator can be a user or an account administrator. There are no restrictions in terms of roles across filers, so an account administrator at one filer can be a user at another filer. In addition, for delegation, there will be delegated administrators and delegated users. If a filer delegates to another CIK, the account administrator at the delegated CIK, delegated entity CIK, automatically will become a delegated administrator with regards to that delegation. Those delegated administrators can determine which of their users will be delegated users who can make filings with regards to that delegation. Next slide, please. Diagram 3 shows how delegation works and is also taken from the adopting release. In this diagram, filer A is delegating to filer B, who may be a filing agent, law firm, broker-dealer, or some other entity who will be filing on filer A's behalf. The account administrators for filer B are delegated administrators with regards to that delegation. Those delegated administrators can file on filer A's behalf and can also authorize users from filer B to become delegated users who can file on behalf of filer A. No individual from filer A can see or take any action on filer B's dashboard, and no individual from filer B can see or take any action on filer A's dashboard. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, EDGAR Next will permit filers to use 15 optional EDGAR APIs. These will allow machine-to-machine communication to EDGAR for submission and retrieval of information. In order to use these APIs, the filer will need to have enrolled in EDGAR Next or submitted a Form ID application that is granted by Commission staff on or after March 24, 2025. Next slide, please. The EDGAR Next APIs will generally require security tokens to be presented for identification and access purposes. The filer API token will identify the entity using the API, such as a law firm, broker-dealer, filing agent, or filer. The user API token will identify the individual using the API, who will need to be a user or account administrator of the entity. The filer API token may be shared between a filer and a delegated entity, and vice versa. In contrast, user API tokens may not be shared. There are various options for using API tokens. For example, in scenario 1 below, if the filer wanted one of their employees to use the APIs directly, the filer's employee could present the filer's API token and the employee's own user API token. Conversely, in scenario 4 below, if the filer delegated to a filing agent, law firm, broker-dealer, and directed that entity to use the APIs directly on the filer's behalf, an employee of that delegate entity could submit the delegate entity's filer API token and the employee's own user API token. Note that in scenario 4, the filer would not have to obtain a filer API token, and the filer's employees would not need to obtain user API tokens. Next slide, please. Please consult the EDGAR Next webpage for background information at EDGAR Next, as well as guidance materials, which will be periodically updated to address new issues. In particular, please note the website has a transition infographic with important dates to prepare, enroll, and comply with EDGAR Next, as well as step-by-step filer guidance and information on the new EDGAR Next APIs. Next slide, please. The EDGAR Next webpage also contains recordings and slide decks of various webinars, as well as information about instructional videos that are posted on the SEC's YouTube channel. In addition, please note that the filer support team may be contacted by email and telephone with your questions regarding EDGAR Next. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Margie Marrero. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Dan. So let's work on preparation for enrollment. Hi, my name is Margie Marrero, and I'm a Senior Special Counsel with the EDGAR Business Office. We will go over preparing for enrollment in EDGAR Next now. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, please review the information on the EDGAR Next website, which is on sec.gov under Submit Filings. Filing agents, broker-dealers, and other public companies associated with Section 16 filers should identify internal colleagues and external entities involved in the filing process for each Section 16 filer. Identify if the Section 16 filer is associated with any other public company. Consider how you're going to gather all the contact information needed for manual enrollment of existing CIKs, or if a new Form ID will be needed to be submitted. For existing CIKs, gather the CCCs and passphrases. We have guidance on the website on how to reset CCCs and passphrases, if necessary, for enrollment or for filing during the transition period. For enrollment, we are not requesting POAs be submitted, but each company and filer may wish to consider if an existing POA authorizes the new account administrator functions, including delegated relationships. This does not change any other POA requirements for EDGAR filing. Notarized POAs are required for amended Form ID. Next slide, please. Everyone involved in the EDGAR filings should educate themselves about EDGAR Next. Determine who will be the account administrator for each CIK. For individual filers, they can choose to have only one account admin. We recommend at least having 2 account admins at any time to prevent delays in filing. Every CIK can have up to 20 account admins. Determine if delegated filing permissions will be provided to another CIK. Unlimited delegations are allowed for any enrolled CIK. Determine who will enroll each filer and when enrollment will occur between March 24th and December 19th. Anyone can enroll a CIK. They don't need to be the account admin. each account admin included in the enrollment will be automatically added to the filer's account. Section 16 filers who do not wish to manage their own account are not required to have an active role on the dashboard. For example, if a law firm has actively managed filings in the past for a filer, the law firm will continue to do so in the future. Determinative submissions will be made directly via the filing websites or optional APIs. To use the APIs as a user token associated with a login.gov user or account administrator profile, and a filer token associated with a CIK is required. As noted before, delegated relationships can be useful in using the optional APIs including the enrollment and submission APIs. Next slide, please. Coordinate with other public companies that share the Section 16 filers to ensure updated information is shared on a timely basis, such as notification of when enrollment occurs. Coordinate with all service providers, including filing agents, law firms, and broker-dealers, including other entities involved in the filing process, such as corporate affiliates. Share your plans for enrollment if any additional information is needed to successfully file after enrollment. Coordinate with delegated entities regarding how delegations will be established. Will the filer send a request after enrollment via invitation, or will the filer opt in to receive delegations to allow other filers such as filing agents, broker-dealers, law firms to request delegation from a filer to file on their behalf? If API tokens will be utilized, and which CIK will create the filer tokens? The person who will enroll the Section 16 filer needs to have the filer's CIK, CCC, passphrase, account admin names, login.gov email address, business address, and phone number for each account admin. If they're going to add additional account admins, tech admins, or users after enrollment, they will only need the individual's email and name for the invitation to be sent. Next slide, please. Now we're going to go over obtaining individual account credentials. Next slide, please. Individual account credentials will be used to track and identify individuals logging into EDGAR to take actions on behalf of filers. The login.gov email address should be unique to the person accessing EDGAR and should not be shared with others. EDGAR Filer Management website will require individual account credentials for accessing starting March 24th, 2025. Starting September 15th, EDGAR filing and online forms websites will require individual account credentials. The use of CIK and password to make filings will no longer work. Section 16 filers will not need to obtain individual account credentials if they will not be personally making filings and managing their own account, but they will need to authorize someone else to manage their account and file on their behalf. Public EDGAR and all public filings will remain on the same website and will not require login.gov individual account credentials. Next slide, please. You can set up login.gov accounts now from the Adopting Beta Filer Management website. Starting March, navigate to the EDGAR Filer Management website. This URL is the same as the current URL. Your current bookmarks should continue to work. If you have not already created login.gov credentials, follow the prompts to create a new login.gov account. Remember setting up login.gov accounts or connecting to Filer Management to use the email address you want associated with your profile on the EDGAR Filer Management website. Next slide, please. You will be redirected back to the EDGAR Filer Management website after successfully setting up your account on login.gov. If you have trouble with login.gov credentials, please contact the Login.gov Help Center. SEC staff will not be able to help resolve problems with Login.gov. Next slide, please. Sorry, was one slide off. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Lil-Rita Finch.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much, Margie. As Margie mentioned, I'm Larita Finch, and I'm also a Senior Special Counsel in the EDGAR Business Office. We will now be discussing the enrollment process. So if you could change to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. Actually, the next slide. As an overview for enrollment, we'd like you to know that enrollment is a streamlined process that allows existing EDGAR filers to transition to EDGAR Next in a simplified process. A benefit of enrollment is that it does not require presenting a Form ID, notarization documents, or a power of attorney to SEC staff. Enrollment requests are typically processed and effective the same day they are submitted. Filers enroll on the dashboard on the new EDGAR Filer Management website. Filers enroll by submitting the information requested in the Enroll section on the dashboard. Existing filers should not attempt to enroll on Form ID. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Actually, you can go back one. Enrollment opens March 24th, 2025. Now let's address more specifically who should enroll. Enrollment is required for all EDGAR filers that obtained their CIK number before enrollment opens on March 24th. New filers, namely the CIKs whose Form ID application for EDGAR access are submitted and granted by SEC staff on or after March 24th, will be automatically subject to EDGAR Next via their amended Form ID, and they do not need to enroll. Each filer may enroll only once, and only one individual can enroll each filer. Therefore, as Margie mentioned, each filer should coordinate with all individuals and entities who currently file on their behalf to determine which entity or individual the filer will authorize to enroll it, and ensure that others do not attempt to enroll the filer without authorization. Next slide, please. Compliance with EDGAR Next is required to file on EDGAR as of September 15th, 2025. Beginning September 15th, filers that have not enrolled or been granted access after submitting amended Form ID will be unable to file on EDGAR until they enroll. Enrollment ends on December 19th, 2025. Failure to enroll by December 19th will result in loss of EDGAR access unless an amended Form ID is submitted and granted by SEC staff. Next slide, please. The information required for enrollment. Filers should further prepare for enrollment by ensuring that they have all the information necessary to enroll. The following information is needed: the filer's CIK, CCC, and passphrase, the name, email address, business address, and business telephone number for each account administrator, the quarter end date by which the filer will perform annual confirmation on EDGAR, either March 31st, June 30th, September 30th, or December 31st. And the filer must identify whether it is a single member company. As mentioned earlier, please note that individual Section 16 filers are not required to obtain login.gov individual account credentials and enroll themselves. However, if they choose not to enroll themselves, they must authorize an individual or entity to enroll them. One key point about who you authorize to enroll a filer is that to please select someone you trust. This can include, but is not limited to, the filer's employee, the filer's filing agent or law firm, or other trusted entity or individual. We remind you that the person or entity the filer selects to enroll them will have sensitive information about the filer's account necessary for enrollment. So again, if the Section 16 filer is authorizing another individual or entity to enroll them, please select someone you trust. Next slide, please. What is not needed for enrollment? What is not needed for enrollment, there is no power of attorney needed to enroll. Filers authorize account administrators by providing their name and their information during enrollment and providing the filer's CIK, CCC, and passphrase. Therefore, the filers are presumed to have authorized the person enrolling them by providing that person the filer's CIK, CCC, and passphrase. Notarization is not required. Next slide, please. Only 2 account administrators can be authorized during enrollment. More account administrators can be added on the dashboard after enrollment. We encourage all filers to authorize 2 account administrators during enrollment, but individual and single-member company filers are only required to authorize 1 account administrator. Nevertheless, we do recommend that individuals and single-member company filers authorize 2 account administrators to avoid access and account management problems that may arise if the single account administrator is unavailable. Next slide, please. The benefits of early enrollment. Filers that have successfully enrolled or have been granted access after submitting amended Form ID on the dashboard on or after March 24th, 2025, will immediately have the option to use APIs to make submissions and take other actions. There is no downside to enrolling early, namely before the September 15th compliance date. Submissions on EDGAR filing and EDGAR online form websites will continue per the existing access process for all filers, regardless of whether they have enrolled, until the close of business for EDGAR on September 12th, 2025. Next slide, please. I'm going to make just a few additional points about the use of the APIs. The Section 16 filer can make submissions and manage its accounts using APIs. Typically, the account administrator or delegated entity for the Section 16 filer will manage and use the APIs. To use APIs, the account administrator or delegated entity will need to present both a filer API token and a user API token that they generate on the dashboard. Next slide, please. And with that, we have concluded our formal presentation. We would like to open it up now to questions and answers. We invite you to please type your questions into the chat.
See, one of the common questions is, will the slide deck be made available? And yes, it will be. It'll take a few days to get it posted on the website.
Now, there's a question from Jim. We understand that EDGAR Next permits up to 20 account administrators. What are some factors that might affect the filer's decision to appoint administrators at more than one company? E.g., is it necessary for an individual Section 16 insider to have account administrators at each of their affiliated companies rather than naming delegated entities? So in answer to this, I would say it's not necessary to do anything specifically like that. I think it depends on the filer's comfort level, the filer's discretion, the filer's preferences. The filer can choose who they want to manage their account. So they could say, look, I want one account administrator at each company that I sit at as an officer or director to be an account administrator, or they could say, look, I just want this one particular person at this one company to do it because I trust them the most, and they can make everyone else a user that reports up to them. Or they could say, look, I want to be an account administrator. I want to do it myself. I want to be hands-on. Or they could say, look, I'm going to, have one account administrator and then delegate to a filing agent or law firm. So it's really a decision that needs to be made in consultation with the filer and their preferences, and perhaps with consideration of the logistics of who the different parties are. You may also need to talk to the filing agents to see to what extent they're willing to potentially have their individual employees serve as account administrators. So I think there is some coordination that needs to occur here.
There's a question about how to reset your passphrase. There's how do I guidance on the website that's always been there. We also just updated it, but we also created a short one-page guidance specifically for EDGAR Next on the EDGAR Next page on how to reset your passphrase and how to update your EDGAR POC email address so you can reset the tokens for your CCC or passphrase. The passphrase is going to be moved to the dashboard. It will remain on the dashboard when it goes live. Right now, you can do it same old way. In the future, it'll still be there. There's a functionality on the enrollment to reset passphrase if you don't get it done before enrollment.
There's a question from Marty. Will this presentation be made available to participants? Is there a service to help users enroll? So I think the first part has been answered with regards to is there a service to help users enroll? So I think, the commission is not offering a service, but our expectation is that a lot of filing agents will be offering that service. I think it's important to reach out to the filing agents that you use to see if they will be offering the service or not, and if so, if they will be requiring any additional documentation, paperwork, service agreements. Please coordinate with them. Please ask them, do you have the Section 16 officers, CCC, and passphrase? And they may say no, I don't have it, or I don't, please get it for me. So there is definitely coordination that needs to occur here.
There's a question if you actually have to have account administrators from each of the companies, or can you use delegations? It is up to you. You can add people at each company that you work with as an account administrator, or you can choose to have delegated relationships to help manage.
There's a question, does your CCC change automatically when you enroll? You'll need that new CCC to continue filing with Legacy EDGAR until December 15th. The answer is yes, your CCC will change automatically when you enroll. You will need it to continue filing with Legacy EDGAR until December 15th. But after you enroll, if you add individuals as users or account administrators, or if you delegate to filing agents, once they're on the dashboard as authorized individuals or entities, they can see the CCC. So the goal is to, as part of the enrollment process, hopefully you will add the relevant people. So at that point, you don't need to be emailing around the CCC. Instead, the CCC will be stored in a centralized, secure location.
There's a question from Claudia. Will the forms themselves change, forms 3, 4, et cetera? So the answer to that question is no. The forms 3, 4, your 10K filings, the substance of those forms will not change. EDGAR Next deals with access to EDGAR. Now, as we've mentioned in other webinars, our Form ID will be amended, and you can see a copy of what the Form ID looks like at the bottom of the release. It's attached as Appendix A. You can also go into the beta and look at Form ID to see how that has been revised. But your general filings, the Forms 3, 4, 5, et cetera, they will not change.
There's a question about how to enroll without a passphrase. You can't do manual enrollment without a passphrase, but we have provided guidance as indicated before. If you can currently file for a client, you have their CIK and CCC, you can help update their EDGAR, their current EDGAR POC, and you can reset the passphrase. It will come to the email that's in that POC's contact information within Retrieve Edit Data, and you will use that passphrase for enrollment. If you can't do that, if you don't have any current codes, unable to help update your client's information, you will have to either now or after March 24th submit a new Form ID.
There's a question asking if you enroll, are you required to start filing pursuant to EDGAR Next, or can you keep on using the legacy filing systems until September 12th? It's the latter. So there's no penalty to enrolling early. It doesn't lock you in to filing with that method. You will continue to file with the legacy filing system, the legacy filing process. There's only an advantage to enrolling, because once you enroll, you can start using the APIs in addition to filing through the websites with the legacy process.
And I'll just add, if for whatever reason you just have the passphrase and a CCC, and afterwards, for whatever reason, you need to get a password to continue to file for whatever reason, you can still reset password during the transition period.
There's a question, if we use a law firm to file all our Section 16 filings, do we just need to identify the law firm as a delegated entity for each filer? So that is one way to do it. Another way is if the filer is comfortable and if the law firm is comfortable, you could have the law firm, one of the employees of the law firm, act as an account administrator, or potentially even one of the users from the law firm act as a user. So then they would specifically be part of your account, so you wouldn't have to delegate to them. So if the person from the law firm was an account administrator, at that point, they could add or remove additional employees as necessary, and they could handle whatever needs to be handled.
There's a question about how long the enrollment process takes. It takes a couple minutes to type it in. It's not a lot of fields, and once you validate the CCC and passphrase and enter your data, hit submit, you're in. It doesn't take very long.
Yeah, just to clarify, so with Form IDs, there's a staff review process where it takes a couple days. With the enrollment process, you push the button, and then if the codes are entered correctly, it'll automatically validate it within like a second. So there's no multi-day waiting process. So it's advantageous to enroll because that will be faster, and you don't need to notarize anything. You don't need to fill out a lengthy form. So if you can enroll, you should enroll. If you cannot enroll, then you'll need to submit a Form ID, but that takes more time. It's more burdensome. It's going to be more costly to get a notary. It's just not efficient to submit a Form ID if you can enroll.
I'd just like to add to that, everything Dan and Margie said, I second, but also we did emphasize in our presentation that you should be coordinating with others, everyone who files on behalf of the filer, so that they're all aware who is enrolling, because only one individual can enroll each filer, and each filer can only enroll one time. And then once that filer is enrolled, the account administrator for that filer, if you want to add more than the 2 account administrators that are permitted during the enrollment process, and again, if you're a single member company, you only have to add 1 account administrator. We still encourage 2, but you can have as many as 20 account administrators. You can have users, you can delegate. So you do want to go ahead and add all the other individuals or entities associated with that filer, very soon after you enroll, so that everyone is on the same page.
There's a question, how do we get the passwords for individuals who only have CIK and CCC? So there is guidance on the EDGAR Next webpage that walks through resetting credentials, including resetting passphrase and resetting CCC for people who have forgotten their CCC. So please consult that guidance. There's a question, will you please explain how APIs are used? So APIs are essentially, they enable machine-to-machine connections. So they're much more stable and they're much faster, where machines can transmit, hundreds of transactions in a second. So you could do hundreds of filings in a second. It's much more efficient. You could do things in bulk. It's mostly used by filing agents or super large filers who have many CIKs that they control. So probably if you're using a filing agent, they're going to be using APIs. And as part of that process, you may want to discuss to what extent the filing agent will be using its own API tokens, or if you want them to use your API tokens. If you don't care, then you can just defer to the filing agent. But some people, to the extent they have a preference, they may want to specify, I want my token to be used, or I want you to use your token. So just be aware that that's something that if you have any interest in, you may want to specify that with the filing agent.
There's a question about whether or not the Section 16 filer themselves has to specifically make or create a login.gov account. They don't. If the relationship is already established and you want to continue as a law firm or whoever filing for somebody, and they've given you permissions, and they want to be completely hands-off and you to handle it for them, you can continue that relationship as is, and they do not have to create their own login.gov account. As long as you actually enroll them and there's somebody that annually does the confirmations for whoever the account administrators are, they don't have to do their own management.
There's a question, what is the benefit for a company to authorize a law firm as a delegate entity versus having the firm be an account administrator? So an account administrator, a user, a technical administrator, those are all individual roles. So you cannot have a law firm be an account administrator. If you want to delegate to a CIK or to an entity, you need to have them be a delegated entity. So I think the upside to that is in a situation where you have a unknown person, but you have a specific filing agent, you can delegate to them. Or if you have a relationship with a specific person, there's a specific partner that at a law firm that you really like, and he said, look, I don't know if I'm going to be at this law firm forever. Why don't you just, make me an account administrator personally? If you have that kind of relationship with him and you feel comfortable, you can do that. So that's, it's a decision that the filing agent and the filer will need to make in consultation with each other based on their preferences and based on what they feel comfortable doing. But ultimately, the filer is the one, the Section 16 officer is the one who should have the decision in terms of saying, this is who I want to manage my account, or this is the entity I want to manage my account. You should definitely talk to a Section 16 filer specifically to make sure you know what they want in terms of who will be managing their account.
There's a question about how to access beta and create dummy CIKs. I'm putting the link for the beta in the chat. The website has been updated, and some of the accordions may not be as obvious to others. That at the bottom, at adopting beta, you have to actually hit the plus sign to see the link. The website had gotten fairly long, so we started using accordions so that it wasn't quite as long.
There's a question. It says, for the second account administrator, does this person need to have the filer corporate domain email address? If I understand correctly, they're basically saying, does the account administrator need to have the email address associated with the filer? So they do not need to. They could be a third party. You could have the account administrator be an employee of a filing agent. If you set it up during the enrollment process, then you can just type in someone else's name. But if you set that up by submitting a Form ID and you're making a third party an account administrator, during the Form ID process, you'll need to check a box acknowledging it's a third party, and you'll need to submit a notarized power of attorney. So that's an extra piece of documentation that will be needed if you do this as part of Form ID. It's much easier if you do this as part of the enrollment process. And just to understand the reason why, as part of the enrollment process, as an existing CIK, you will have passphrase, you'll have CCC, you'll have access codes you'll be providing during the enrollment process to verify your authority and your intent. Whereas for a Form ID, a lot of them will be new filers, so they don't have an existing access code to provide. So that's why it's you know, you need to provide that extra authorization through some extra documentation on the Form ID.
There's a question about additional requirements for non-single member companies. There's not additional requirements, just at the enrollment, make sure that there's a checkbox indicating that you're single member. It decreases the requirement from 2 to 1 for account administrators. Because if you're a single member, that means that technically there are no other employees with your company, there's no other trusted person, so you're not required to add a second person. That's the only impact it has.
There's also a question about, is there any delay of effective date expected given the new presidential administration? We are not aware of any delay to any of the dates that we have provided for that reason. If anything should come up and we don't expect it to, we will definitely alert the public.
For the question about working with Workiva, oh, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, that's the one I was going to say. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for all the filing agent websites that you're working with, they will have guidance to you, will be communicating with you if they have not already done so, so that if you want to, each of the filing agents is, offering different services, if they're going to help you with enrollment, if they're going to, utilize the APIs for enrollment, work directly with them. I'm sure they're going to have guidance forthcoming if they don't already have it, and help you establish how to get in, how to use their website. They're working with us. They know the APIs are coming.
Yeah,
this
and
should
just to be
work
clear,
with them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they have their own decisions to make in terms of, are they going to allow their employees to serve as account administrators or not? Do they want to accept that liability, or do they see that as a revenue stream? And are they willing to share their filer API tokens with their clients or not? That's a decision they need to make. So, each filing agent may have different ways of implementing these changes in terms of how it'll affect their own software. So, please coordinate to see, because it could be different with each filing agent or each vendor. There's a question, where will the enroll options be available for the account admin to enroll the individual Section 16 filers? So, yeah, on March 24th, that's when the new dashboard will become available. and the new dashboard will have the enroll feature. So the dashboard is where the EDGAR filer management website is currently located. That's where people currently go to manage accounts. That whole website will get updated on March 24th to provide the dashboard with individual authorized individuals and the delegated entities and the enrollment fee. That'll all be there. So if you don't know where that is, take a look at the EDGAR Next webpage. It'll have information about everything.
For the question about a checklist, we don't exactly have a checklist, but there is the option to do bulk enrollment. And with that, it's sort of a checklist. There's a PDF with instructions for what each of the fields are and a spreadsheet, a CSV file with all of the required fields. The current information that's in the adopting beta right now is still being updated based on some feedback. So I would check back for an updated version. There will be no more required than what's on there. There'll be actually a few less fields.
There's a question, how will filers determine / contact current account admins if they're not currently a user or admin for the CIK? They're not aware of the person who currently has access. So that's a good question. If you are user account admin, you'll be able to see their information. If you're not, I don't recall if you can see the account admin's information. I think you're right that you can't, but you can still send. Presumably, this would be relevant in the context of a delegation. Once you send a delegation invitation, and if they accept, then you'd be connected. So you would send an invitation for delegation to the entity itself, not to the account admin. So you don't need to know the individual's name. You just need to know the CIK of the entity that you want to send the invitation to. There's a question, can you please walk through an example where a director serves on 2+ companies? How would it work to coordinate between the two companies? Does one company enroll the director and then provide access to company 2? So yeah, so I think it depends, but an example would be director serves on companies A and companies B, the director of both. And let's say company A is really anxious to enroll on March 24th. And company B is not ready to enroll and they want to enroll, in June. So I think it's important for them to coordinate, and company B could say, look, we don't want to enroll until June because we're going through some internal compliance changes and we don't know who's going to be the account admin on our side. Can you just please wait? And if you enroll now in March, then the CCC gets reset and we won't know because we're not going to know that until you add one of our employees as an account admin or user, and we can't give you that name yet because we're still working that out. And then company A hopefully will say, oh, okay, that makes sense. Let's talk to the filer, the Section 16 officer, and he'll say, okay, guys, just figure out amongst yourselves, but if company B is not ready, then just wait until company B is ready. Or he could say, look, I just want to get it done. Company B, you figure it out, but I want to enroll on March 24th. I'm really anxious to get it done. Then company B will say, okay, fine. In that case, use this person's name for account admin. Go ahead and enroll. And then company A will enroll and email company B and say, enrollment's done. Your person is now an account admin. If you want to change that later on, make sure you change that or coordinate with us. So, there's definitely some communication that's needed, but it may vary depending on the personalities involved, depending on the companies involved, depending on the scenarios involved.
There's a question about revising or changing, updating CCCs. The new system will allow you to auto-generate, like as current, a new CCC that's provided, or changing it manually to create your own custom CCC. There's no logic preventing a prior CCC from being used. Either method works. And for the question for login.gov credentials, we understand a lot of people have login.gov credentials for, various purposes. Login.gov allows you to have multiple emails. We recommend what you're using for login.gov is for what you're going to share with people for EDGAR. So if you have a business address that you're going to use for EDGAR, create that for login.gov. If you've already created that with login.gov, you don't have to change that. I mean, there's so many different use cases, we can't really go through all of them, but login.gov is not going to prohibit you because you have one social security number that you can only have one email address with it. They will allow you to have more than one.
So there's a question about, is it still correct that the CCC will change when enrolling in EDGAR Next? That would be the downside for enrolling early if everyone doesn't have the new CCC. Well, again, we do ask you to coordinate among yourselves or everyone who is going to have a role in filing for the filer. But it is correct that the CCC will change upon enrolling in EDGAR Next, and that is a security, there's a security reason for that. It is a security precaution. And however, the CCC will be viewable to those who have access to that filer's account on the dashboard. So it's not necessarily the case that if you enroll early, everyone doesn't have the new CCC. It will be available and visible on the dashboard.
So there's a question, did new filers on or after March 24th have a transition period until September, or are they required to begin using as of enrollment date? So yeah, on March 24th, that's when the new filer management website will go into effect. And as part of that, there'll be a new Form ID. So the new Form ID will include data fields for account administrators. So anyone filling out Form ID on or after March 24th, they'll have to list who the account administrator is going to be. It's going to be a different Form ID. So that includes new filers and also existing filers who need to file Form ID. They'll have to fill out that new Form ID as of March 24th.
There's also a question.
Go ahead.
There's a question, does EDGAR Next affect all filings, including registration statements, 10Q, 10K, et cetera? We answered that question a little earlier, but just for those who may not have heard, the EDGAR Next does not change the substance of what you need to file with the SEC. So it does not change the substance of any of your registration statements, 10Ks, Forms 3, 4, 5. EDGAR Next addresses access to EDGAR and filer account management. So you enroll in EDGAR Next so that you will have access to the new dashboard and you are better able to manage all of those doing filings or involved in the filing process on behalf of the filer. But it does not change the requirements or the substance of what you file with the Commission in terms of your forms, Forms 3, 4, 5, 10K, 10Q. As we mentioned, Form ID is being amended as part of EDGAR Next, but that is the only form, so to speak, that is changing. When I say so to speak, Form ID is filed electronically, it's submitted electronically. So that is the only thing that is changing in the realm of a form with respect to EDGAR Next.
Here's a question about if a user, like such as somebody that's an employee of a filing agent, would have to fill out Form ID and get a CIK. No. All of the account administrators, users, technical administrators, they are not required to go get an individual CIK. They are required to get login.gov credentials to create their user profile on the dashboard. But please, you don't need a CIK. If you're going to be an employee of a filing agent and you're using the filing agent CIK, you do not need a separate CIK. Rita, do you want to take the question about an enrollment guide?
Sure. So as far as an enrollment guide, we are developing both a video and how do I guidance on enrollment, and that should be available reasonably soon, certainly, well in advance of the opening for March 24th. So we are working on that, and that will have, step-by-step instructions of how to enroll on the dashboard. In the meantime, you can go to the beta, and we have provided you today, and when this webinar is posted online, you'll be able to see the slides, which outlines exactly what you need to enroll. There's not much to it in terms of what you actually need to enroll. The big thing is coordinating among yourselves. And once you have the information needed to enroll, which again, the CIK, CCC password, the account administrators, names and information, you can enroll. And the actual enrollment for the filer, it really takes, not more than a minute or two. But you do have access to the beta, which contains the dashboard. And so if you're anxious or ready right now to go try to see what the enrollment process is like, you can do that in the beta.
There's a question. If an entity filer does not have its passphrase after March 24th, it must submit a Form ID in order to enroll, correct? Will the entity filer be assigned a new CIK? Will the entity filer be able to file during the period in which the Form ID is being processed? So with regards to all those concerns, the filing process will remain unchanged until September 12th, I believe. So during March to September, you can enroll, but that doesn't affect your ability to keep on filing with the filing websites with the regular process. So if you don't have your passphrase, you can look for it, you can reset it, you can go to the SEC guidance on the EDGAR Next page to figure out how to reset your passphrase. But in the meantime, you can just keep filing on the websites. If for whatever reason you can't reset your passphrase and you really can't figure it out, then you can file a new Form ID. At that point, if your Form ID is granted, you will not get a new CIK, assuming you filed it for your existing CIK. You'll just gain, assuming you submit the Form ID after March, you'll just gain account admins for that CIK. And at that point, you won't have to enroll because you now have account admins for that CIK.
For the question about broker-dealers and who enrolls and who's a user, the broker-dealer should enroll the CIK that they've been filing under. So for many of the broker-dealers, when the newest Form ID initiative rolled out, obtained new filing CIKs, they should enroll that CIK, and then for the employees that are going to do the filings, they would become account admins or users for that broker-dealer.
There's a question, if I own a delegated entity, such as a filing agent, is there any conflict or issues with myself as the owner acting as a filer and account administrator? Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. I don't see any problems with that. I mean, I think that would be the typical scenario for small business owners where they will be, the account admin, unless they want to be hands off, which they can also do. They can say, I don't want to be an account admin and worry about the details. I want someone else to do it. Then they can make a third party their account admin, like a third party employee, like an individual person from a law firm or filing agent.
For the question about individual access codes being specific to a unique email address, and say you switch companies, there's a couple different ways we can answer the question about it. So if you have a user profile per that address, it goes across all of the accounts that go to your name and that email address. And when you update your name, update your address, And you can also update your email address. There's instructions, they're not out there, they're forthcoming on how to update your login.gov email address so that you don't have to create a whole new set of relationships. So if you decide that you want to, you have a small law firm and you're changing your email address and you want to keep all your relationships, you can update that email address. If you like leave and you only were associated with 2 filers and you've left and you're not going to have those relationships, you can create a whole new email profile with login.gov based on the new company email address and start those relationships fresh. Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that makes sense. I think that addresses the question. So the question, Form ID now requires a response to criminal liability question by several persons, including account administrators listed on the Form ID. So account administrators that are added on the dashboard after the filer has been enrolled need to file anything. Will the account administrators added post-enrollment ever be prompted to respond to the criminal liability question? So I don't think we can talk about, whether they will ever require information in the future with another rulemaking or change to EDGAR. I think we can talk about what's currently contemplated, what we currently have. So right now, that question is only on Form ID. It's not on the dashboard, and it's not part of the enrollment process. So once again, that's another example of where it's just easier to go through the enrollment process as opposed to going through Form ID.
The question about after enrollment and authorizing new people, and do you need a power of attorney or not? Once you're enrolled, there's no manual submission of any paperwork to anybody at the commission to add or remove anybody. It is people who have permissions from you can add and remove at will whenever they want to, and you don't have to present us paperwork. When you have to present us paperwork, and that maybe that power of attorney, is when you lose all your codes and you can't find them and you can't figure out any other way to get back in, and you have to submit a whole new Form ID. But we're trying to make it so you don't have to do that as much as possible, that if you have multiple people that have access, they can help add or remove people as necessary.
The question for a Section 16 insider who is also Rule 144 affiliate, suppose a law firm files his Forms 4 and a broker-dealer files his Form 144. Would a typical rule be issuer GC as account administrator and law firm broker are both users? I mean, I don't know if there's a typical, like I said, I think there's a lot of preferences involved, and I think this question may have been addressed, but just to really address it again, I think an entity at the issuer, it could be the GC, it could be, paralegal, it could be, a member of the corporate compliance staff, could be an account administrator, and the law firm broker could be delegated entities. But, I think it really depends on what the filer wants and what the corporate compliance personnel, probably recommend to the filer they're comfortable doing. I mean, it's possible that some GCs and corporate compliance personnel may say, like, we're not comfortable being account administrators. That's beyond the scope of what we want to do. And as a policy matter, we've decided not to do that. And, Section 16 officer, if you want to have someone do it, you need to hire your own outside counsel because that's a line we're not willing to cross. So I think that's something that, companies need to consider as well. The issuers need to think about in terms of their corporate governance. What do they want to do? Law firms need to think about what they want to do, and filing agents need to think about what they want to do. So there's, we're not requiring a specific one-size-fits-all solution. We want to be flexible to provide different options for different, business needs and different business practices. So they're really we're not requiring, you know, a specific mold. You can kind of choose your own path here.
There's a question about the scope of information that is being confirmed by the annual confirmation by the account administrator each year. The scope of that is what is on the dashboard of, you know, is the company information up to date? Are all the users supposed to be there? You know, account administrators, tech administrators, like, are the relationships that are there, do you still approve of all those people being there? Are there people that should be removed, or the people should be added? It's not, you know, the whole history of the filings for the year. You're doing an annual confirmation of what you see on the dashboard, and all that information is kept up to date, so that you are confirming who has access to do filings for you.
There's a question, does the ability to add additional up to 20 account admins open after the filer is enrolled or after the enrollment period ends, December 19th? So it's the former. So just to clarify, the enrollment process and Form ID after March 24th, both they just add 2 account admins to the account. After that, the account admins need to go to the dashboard, and that's where they can add users, they can add extra account admins, they can add tech admins, they can add delegated entities. So the enrollment and Form ID just add those 2 account admins, or 1, depending on if it's a single member company or individual. And then the account admins need to go to the dashboard and then add more people. The exception to that is if you're using APIs, you can add more people or entities by using the APIs. So there are scenarios where, let's say there's like a investment fund complex with 100 CIKs. You can just add people in bulk, you know, using the APIs. There's a question, will EDGAR next automatically notify account administrators if a change has been made for a filer? So I think yes, the goal is that if users are added, account administrators are deleted, the account administrators will be automatically notified. They'll get, I think they get messages in the dashboard, and I think they also get emails sent to their login.gov email address.
There's also a question about, will there be a bulk enrollment spreadsheet to use for multiple enrollments? Yes, on the dashboard, there's an option to manually enroll, and that typically would be used by someone who wants to enroll 1 or 2 filers, and you do them each individually, separately. There's also an option to do bulk enrollment, and when you click on the bulk enrollment option, it will open up. There will be a spreadsheet. You can enroll up to 100 at a time. If you have more than 100 filers to enroll, then you would use multiple of the spreadsheets until you get through them. But yes, there is an option for bulk enrollment, and that includes a spreadsheet, and the requirements in terms of the information to enroll is the same as what would be required for the manual enrollment.
So there's a question, will you create FAQ comprised of the chat room questions? You know, we do have existing FAQs actually on the EDGAR Next website. I don't know if we'll specifically commit to adding to that based on this, but I think we'll look at the questions after the chat concludes. We'll go through them, we'll compare them to what's in the FAQ, and I think as appropriate, we will update if necessary. But if there's nothing additional that seems to be relevant, I don't know if we necessarily will update the FAQ.
There's a question, will you be updating the Form ID to make it more clear? So as part of EDGAR Next, or the main part of EDGAR Next, is the rulemaking that the Commission adopted that is on our webpage, and that does actually change Form ID. It amends Form ID, if you're looking for what is included in Form ID, you can either go to the dashboard available through the beta currently, and you can go in and electronically utilize Form ID, see what it looks like, test it out. You can also go to the actual release, and you can look at the end of the release where Form ID is added as Appendix A, and that is a written out version of what is included in Form ID. And so that is the change to Form ID. So for the foreseeable future, it will not be further updated to make it more clear. Now, I'm not speaking indefinitely, but this process that we're doing now is the change to Form ID.
As we only have 10 minutes left, I'm scrolling to see more unique questions. Somebody asked if you could revoke a delegation. Yes. So accepting a delegation requires an action. If you want to terminate a delegation, it's immediate. They don't have to accept that you've terminated them. And for all of the questions about making sure the POC email address is available to update so you can do the codes, if you have the ability to file right now for a client and you can sign in with your CIK and your password, you can sign in with your client's CIK and CCC and update that point of contact so you can use the token resets for passphrase and CCC.
Yeah, and so that'll still be available after March 24th. So the specific links available on the dashboard will be gone after the 24th, but you can still update passphrase and CCC by using those functions that Margie mentioned after the 24th.
And the retrieve edit data functionality prior to enrollment will stay as it is now for updating company information and changing that point of contact. After enrollment, the system will know that you've changed the point of contact to be on the dashboard, and you will just do all updates on the dashboard. But to help you get enrolled, it's going to stay. You're still going to be able to update things so you can get your codes and get enrolled.
There's a question asking what the difference is between a user and a delegated user and an account admin and delegated admin. So just to clarify, the delegated roles refer to individuals at the delegated entity. So if you're using a filing agent, the account admins of the filing agent will be the delegated admins for the delegation, and the users of the filing agent will be delegated users for the delegation. So if you're at the filer, you couldn't manage who the delegated users are. You would tell you would basically just have to defer to the account admin at the filing agent, and they would manage their own users. So you could direct them, but to protect the PII, the names of identities of the individual employees, you wouldn't be able to see all their email addresses and all their names and things like that. Only the account admin at the filing agent could manage their own people.
There's a question, if you enroll in beta, do you need to re-enroll after March 25th? It's March 24th, but yes, you do have to, all of the beta information stays within the beta. It is not going to impact any real filings, any other production information. It's just a test environment, so you will have to re-enroll. But that said, you can also go test relationships and see how they work in the beta, and you're not going to have to worry about it carrying over.
So I've actually seen several questions, and Dan has done a wonderful job of explaining some of the differences between the delegated user and delegated entity and user and delegated entity. But I see in the chat, repeats of those types of questions and other similar questions. The diagrams that we have used in this presentation are very helpful. And these diagrams also are in our actual release our EDGAR Next release that the Commission approved. And within that release, and I do recognize that it's very long, but it is divided up with the table of contents, and there is a lot of content in there about all the different roles for user, account administrator, delegated entity, delegated user. All of that is explained in great detail. And we also, in the release, explain a lot of the questions and comments that we received from the filing community during this process leading up to the adoption of our release. So I do encourage you, a lot of these very specific questions are answered in that release.
Oh, this is interesting. I want to flag this. So there's a comment that says, for those interested in coordination for Section 16 insiders with multiple affiliated companies and vendors, the Society for Corporate Governance will be hosting a roundtable on March 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So, you know, we have no official, we can't officially direct you to them, but to the extent you're interested, just wanted to point that out.
So there is a question that, are there any webinars that specifically address APIs? So we have in the past had an overview and a Q&A, a couple of Q&As specifically designated for those interested in the APIs, and they were targeted at very technical individuals, those who really understand and are using the APIs. We have had those. I guess we'll have to discuss maybe if we might add another. But we have addressed the APIs, and we will take under advisement how best to provide future guidance on that.
Just to add what Loretta is saying, if you use a filing agent or other service provider that is going to let you use their software to file, and you want to sign in as you, creating a user token to use their system is very, very easy. It takes a couple seconds. It's right on the dashboard. It's not a hard process. I'm sure they will have guidance for you, but it's not very cumbersome. And you can continue if you want to file, you know, directly using their APIs like you would have on a website. It should be fairly simple for you to get once you're enrolled to be able to do that.
There's a question about bulk enrollment through a template spreadsheet, and if you enroll like 103 are incorrect, yes, you will be prompted on the dashboard that 3 are incorrect, and it will let you know what is incorrect.
There's a question, what happens if a CIK is enrolled a second time by a second filing agent? The second enrollment will fail. I think you'll receive a message saying the filer has already enrolled. So that's why it's important to coordinate in advance and make sure you have all the proper information, because if you rush to enroll and forget to add an account admin or a user or whatnot, the other person is sort of locked out, and they will have to be added manually by the first account admin. And they also won't be informed when the CCC changes. So please coordinate, make sure that all parties are in the loop before you enroll.
And to add to what Dan's saying, if that happens, it's not the end of the world. If you know who else has codes, check with them. I mean, you should be hopefully in coordination anyways. Check with them and they can quickly add you. You accept it, and then you're going to be on the dashboard and you can file.
I think we're almost at time, but I do see one rather lengthy question about the CIK, CCC, point of contact, and all the codes. We do have guidance on our EDGAR Next webpage about a variety of scenarios regarding getting and updating your various codes, and if you don't have this code but you have another code, how do you go about it? We do have that guidance on our EDGAR Next page, and it goes step by step as to how and what to do.
Yeah, I think we should wrap this up with, thank you everyone for your questions. We will preserve these questions and go through them, and to the extent that there are questions that are not answered that are relevant that we can easily address in writing, we will do so and add those to the FAQs.